I'm here with Lieutenant Colonel Oz Alashe, MBE, Lieutenant Colonel retired, I should say. 17 years in the Army, 14 years in the Special Forces, in the Parachute Regiment, and 16 years a member of HTB, and for the last few years a member of part of the leadership team, the core leadership team of HTB, the standing committee of the PCC, and also CEO and founder of Cybesafe, a firm working in, well, really leading the way in cybersecurity. So Oz, it's so good to have you. Just a little bit about your background. First of all, your faith background.
Yeah, Nicky, hey, thanks so much for having me, and it's great to join you. As you described, I've been at HTB for a while, but prior to that, I was, of course, I consider myself extremely fortunate. I was raised in a Christian household. Not originally, my parents separated when I was very young. My mother raised us. My mother is an extremely faith-filled woman, and we were raised in a Pentecostal church in North London, a Pentecostal church actually that was originally based in Finsbury Park, if I remember correctly. And I remember as a young child growing up in that church and getting to the point where, as a teenager, being presented with this question, which was, are you going to choose yourself, rather than, it's not enough to just be raised in the church. It's a choice. The relationship with Christ is a choice. What is your choice?
And Cybesafe, just say that you founded that in 2015, Cybesafe. You're the CEO, the founder. Just describe briefly, what does that do?
Yeah, so Cybesafe, it's a software company. We are focused on cybersecurity and data analytics, and we're focused on the human aspect of cybersecurity. So we've been building an intelligent software platform for the last 3 years that helps measure and predict security behaviors and reduce human cyber risk.
And I've heard you say it's all about service. I mean, just like your time in the military was about service, you see your job now as about service. Just say, how can that be?
So I think that, and I'm not the only person who thinks like this. I think many leaders in whatever sphere, or whatever they're leading in, will understand that the most appropriate way to lead is to serve. Actually, the motto at Sandhurst is serve to lead. So the military really does get this, but of course, lots and lots of other parts of society do too. I believe that's the case because, of course, as a leader, our job is to create the conditions for those that we lead to succeed and to help them do that with a goal in mind, with an aim in mind, or moving towards a vision. I very firmly believe that actually good leadership looks like service. Good leadership looks like eating last. Good leadership looks like doing the extra work. Good leadership looks like putting other people before yourself.
And so the last 3 weeks the world is shaking. The world was shaking already through COVID-19, yeah. And then the brutal killing of George Floyd has again sent shockwaves through the world. And so just say how you're feeling about that and what you think we should be doing.
So, Nicky, there's no doubt that there is an awakening. It's not yet accepted by everybody, but there's been an awakening and a spotlight thrown on racial inequality and on the scourge that racism has on society, and in particular, the racist impact or the effect of racism on Black people. And of course, George Floyd's death, which was not just tragic, but was so graphically represented and caught on camera, has been the spark of the latest rounds of protests. But of course, this isn't the first time that these protests have taken place. The question that needs to be asked of every single person, which is, how much longer will we allow an injustice to take place and occur that we know shouldn't exist? In doing so, I think we can then be really explicit about what it is we think needs to change and what role we might play in that. Quite often, there are people who don't realize that what they're saying or doing is racist or harmful. In fact, they kind of try to justify it by saying, oh, I don't mean you, or, hey, boss, we're not talking about, clearly we don't mean paratroopers. Actually, we don't see color in the parachute regiment. There is no such thing. And of course, that is absolutely true. The parachute regiment, there's often a joke that the parachute regiment sees paratroopers and everybody else. If you're outside of that group, then you're everybody else. But the truth of the matter is, actually, sometimes that expression of everybody else is inappropriate. And organisations all across the globe and all across society do this. As leaders, our job is to determine what is acceptable within the sphere, and then deal with it, confront it head on. It's not always easy, and of course, as a result, and rank is less of an issue in this particular case. This is about leadership at every single level. There are junior leaders doing the right thing. There are senior leaders doing the wrong thing. Rank has nothing to do with it.
And in the church, it's great to have you part of the senior leadership team of HTB. So what are the things that you feel we should be doing as a church, and generally the church should be doing right now to address this issue?
So I think the church is uniquely placed. The first thing that everybody must do, everybody, actually on both sides, if there were sides of this conversation, actually I'm not entirely sure it's about two sides, but is listen, understand what is being said, and consider what we need to act upon. Actually, there's some things that are being said that I'm not entirely sure are the focus, but there are some things that are being said that I think are being missed, and the church needs to listen. But as well as listen, we also need to act. And so, some of the conversations that we've had as a church here at HTB have included, what does action look like? How do we ensure that we prepare our leaders, our clergy, those other members of our church who are in positions of leadership, so that they are confident enough to have difficult conversations that demonstrate the counter to racism, which is love. The counter to racism is not a really clever, intricate argument about why you should stop being racist. The counter to racism is love. And love requires absolute strength. It's actually quite hard to do when people have done the wrong thing against you. It's actually quite hard to do when you're afraid or you're scared or you're concerned. It's actually really hard to do if you don't understand the perspective that somebody else is coming from. But yet we must do it anyway. So the church needs to demonstrate what that looks like. The church also, I would offer, could take active steps to also repair and heal. Repairing and healing often starts with admitting mistakes, confessing wrongs, not trying to hold anything back in order to move forward. And so some of the conversations we're facing here in the country right now, which revolve around things like, what should we do about our statues and those really important prominent figures from our history and our past who have backgrounds that are not necessarily desirable or not necessarily reflective of the values that we have as a society today. We don't need to hide from those conversations. Those conversations should be had so that we can move forward.
And what should the church's role be in that?
So I think part of the church's role should be about convening a conversation. We see that with some of the outreach work that we do. We see that with some of the work, Love Thy Neighbour work that we do. Actually, this is another example of another way in which the church can minister to society. But it also has to confront some of the difficult conversations about the church's past. There have been members of the church and indeed senior leadership that have also made mistakes. And these were mistakes. So let's declare them as mistakes and demonstrate what it looks like to admit our mistakes and move forward.
We can only feel ashamed of our history, really, because of the Church of England's involvement in the slave trade and the appalling way the Windrush generation were treated.
There are very few of us and very few countries that can claim that there are things in our past that were wholly inappropriate, in many ways sometimes abhorrent, but yet go on to do good things. And I think the church, if there's an organization that can outlive its evil past, or indeed actually be, despite all of that, God still use, it's the church. So one of the reasons why we're blessed at HTB, we have an incredibly diverse church. We don't yet have it right across the leadership throughout the church, and we don't necessarily have the representation from the pulpit that we would love to see people leading, but that will change by God's grace over time if we do the work. And you're leading us to do the work, and it's incredible doing that.
And Oz, just moving forward, what are your hopes, your dreams for
Gosh.
For our, well, for the church, but also for our world? What do you see the future? Because I mean, you're involved in a world that is really looking to the future. You've just done a virtual summit for 2,000 people. You know, you're listening to what's going on in our world. What are you seeing? What does the future hold?
And I think that we have a choice now. The global reset that arguably is in the process of happening right now because of the global pandemic, whether that's looking at our financial institutions, whether that's looking at our societal structures, whether that's looking at the way in which we conduct our business or live our lives. There's a bunch of questions that we're being presented, and they ultimately come back to what kind of world do we want to live in? The sustainability debate, the way in which we use technology, the way in which we treat each other from an equality perspective. My hopes and dreams are that we have that conversation. What kind of world do we want to live in? And then what will we do as individuals, as families, as institutions, as societies, as neighborhoods, as countries, to play our part in creating that kind of world? What we are aiming to do right now is shift the silent majority. We need to shift the silent majority. And if we shift the silent majority to go from I do no harm, or I believe I do no harm, to I actively do good. And actually that good for some people will be changing the course of history. And for some people it will be just changing the way that people around them speak. But ultimately it's a choice. If we can do that now, we'll make a lot of progress.
And today's Father's Day, what in terms of fathering, what do you do that is again that makes a difference in this area?
So I'm the first to admit that I definitely don't get this all right all the time, but I think that one of the things that is really important, and I can say this maybe as somebody who didn't have this, but as a father, we are called, of course, to love our children, and that's probably one of the easiest things to do, albeit sometimes we're probably slightly frustrated at some of the things they may do. But we're also called to set an example. So I ask myself, and I don't get this right all the time, but I do ask myself, what example am I setting my children? Am I setting them an example that means that if they were to copy me, I would be proud and happy to know not just that they do that, but that I help to contribute towards that?
So so people listening to this, if there was one thing you wanted the people to take away from lessons you've learned, I mean, you've had a long, although you're very young, you've had a long time leading, 17 years in the army, 5 years leading this new venture. What is the one thing you would want people to take away?
So I think it's really the two things tied together. It's this concept of opportunity and the concept of leadership. It's never the wrong time to do the right thing, and that is really about opportunity. That is about acknowledging what we have in front of us and making the most of it. And making the most of it might be correcting wrongs, but making the most of it might also be making a decision in the moment about a stance that we're going to take. Right now, I think societally we have that opportunity. We have it about as talking about racial inequality, and we need to make decisions. We have it about talking about sustaining our planet and what we're doing to it. We have it when we talk about the way in which we treat each other regardless of race. How do we do the right thing? So I think we should take the opportunity. But the second point tied to that is, and show leadership. And quite often I think when people think of leaders, they think of people who are doing in a different position. They don't think of themselves as leaders, but every single person listening to this right now will be a leader in one way, shape or form, whether they are leading in their household, at work, a particular project, a particular initiative, whether it's literally just taking something from an idea to delivering it. And all of that requires us to think of it as our opportunity to lead and serve. So that's what I would offer to take as a takeaway. As a group, let's lean into that. Let's lean into the opportunity. Let's lean into the call and for leadership that we have. Let's make a difference.
Brilliant, brilliant, Oz. Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing at HTB. It's amazing that what the contribution you and Gemma and your family have made. And your children are on. Kids have been leading in the kids' work as well. So
love it. They absolutely love it. And it's an incredible community here at HTB. And of course, we are. People often forget that as a community, as a church, it is closely knit, and we are a family, and that for us is really quite important. Our Connect group, our service at Onslow Square, the time we spend with all of the other services, and the time we spend with all of the other groups that make up our church. We're hugely proud of it.